Hello and welcome to Lesson 11 of Ecosystems, Biodiversity and Management. We are now going to be starting to look at the final part of this topic, which is a detailed look at the deciduous woodland biome, or better known as the temperate deciduous forest biome. So by the end of this session, you should know in detail the characteristics of deciduous woodlands and hopefully know the difference between them and the tropical rainforest ecosystem that we already looked at in the last 3 sessions. So, temperate deciduous forests, or deciduous temperate forests, however which way round you say it, are found in the temperate zones. So they are found between the tropics of Cancer and the Arctic Circle in the north, and between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Antarctic Circle in the south. So these do not appear within or between the Tropics of Cancer and Capricorn or near the equator, meaning that the climate of them is generally a lot more cold, but also mainly characterized by seasons. So we get more of a 4-seasonal approach in these temperate regions: spring, summer, autumn, winter. Now that's one factor which really sets them apart from tropical rainforests from the outset. And you can see from this image that the leaves have been falling from the trees and they've gone a kind of golden colour in what we'd call our autumn. Now there is a YouTube video linked to this, which is also saved on 365, whichever one is easier for you to find, then please feel free. So the YouTube clip is on the screen now. But if you can't find that, then like I say, it's saved onto the 365 area of the geography website. The geography area. So watch that video just to get an idea about some of the characteristics of deciduous woodlands that you are reminded of. But really, we don't live too far away from these ourselves. You know, down the road in Foxley Wood is a really great example of an ancient deciduous woodland. So this shouldn't be something which is hugely unfamiliar to you in the outset. So going back to our biomes map, which might seem like quite a long time ago now, and again, this is something which you should be familiar with without the labels on it at all. But what we can see here is that our light blue colour up here, not too light blue, our sort of turquoisey blue represents where you'd find your temperate deciduous forests. So you'll find some in North America to the sort of the east coast. Lots of Europe, most of Europe in fact, is kind of encompassed by this particular biome. Parts of Eastern Asia, Eastern China there, and also the other side of the equator as well. So down here in the southern tip of Australia, New Zealand, and the southern tip of South America. So what you can see in terms of the location is that these do not appear between the tropics anywhere. That's where you're going to find your savanna grassland and your tropical rainforests. So they are cooler areas because they receive less concentrated solar radiation, and also they're seasonal because that angle of tilt of the Earth means that there's a bit of difference over the course of a year of how much energy they get. When the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, it'll get more solar radiation, more direct solar radiation, and therefore we have summer. And the opposite is true in winter when we're tilted away in the northern hemisphere. So that just shows you the difference in terms of where they are located. And what I'd like you to do, just practice your exam skills, is describe the distribution of the world's deciduous forests. So this is just a classic exam question where I want you, don't give any reasons for it, just tell me where it is. Try and give me examples of continents or examples of countries which have this biome in them, but also use those lines of latitude as reference points. Okay, try and aim for 3 or 4 separate points. For example, I'll give you one for free. Large parts of deciduous or temperate deciduous forest are found in the continent of Europe, including countries such as France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. There you go. There's 1 point you could get. But make sure you're referring to, like I say, the position of these lines of latitude as well, and where maybe you don't find temperate deciduous forests. All right, so once you've done that, you can unpause the screen. I'll pause the screen for now, and then we'll move on to the next activity. So this activity talks about Gersmehl models. Again, not something you should be unfamiliar with because we did this same activity with the tropical rainforests. And also there is a note-taking sheet on 365 for all of this information about location and nutrients, etc. for the deciduous forest biome. So please make sure you've got that note-taking sheet if you want to use it, unless you just want to take standard notes in your book. So here we've got our usual kind of Gersmehl model elements. as a bit of a recap for you, it'd be worthwhile you pausing the screen and firstly telling me what the S, the B and the L stand for. Obviously, you don't have to write that down in your book if you already know, just maybe shout out of the screen. Okay, so the S stands for the soil, you're all shouting out. The B stands for the biomass, and the L stands for the litter. And what you can see is that all three actually are quite balanced. They're fairly similar sized. The soil is quite large because we've got quite thick soil in the deciduous forest biome. The biomass, again, there's lots of vegetation, lots of trees, lots of plants, not as many as the tropical rainforest, but still pretty significant. And the litter layer is not just a little speck, okay? During the autumn months particularly, this will actually grow as a nutrient store. Okay, so that's the first challenge done. The second challenge about your memory of Gersmehl models is what are the inputs of P, or W and P, okay? The W represents a word that kind of is critical when it comes to inputting to the soil, and the P represents another critical word when it comes to inputs to the litter store. So what is W, what is P? Okay, W is weathering or weathered material. So this is the parent rock that weathers and then adds nutrients to the soil from below. And the P is precipitation. So rain, hail, sleet and snow, all precipitation which add dissolved nutrients into the litter store. Okay, so you're getting the idea of this now. What are the outputs of the R and the LE? Okay, the R is called runoff and the LE is leaching. So when you lose nutrients from the litter store, it's because too much rain has picked up those nutrients or picked up dead leaves, etc., and washed them away into the river out to sea, and that's called runoff. And also rain can go through the soil layer and remove nutrients by this process called leaching. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now, the last part of this, is actually draw and fully label a nutrient cycle model. This one, try and get it proportionally right as well, but draw and label the nutrient cycle for the deciduous woodland, including these 2 bullet points, okay, because these show that it is different from the tropical rainforest. There's a moderate transfer between stores rather than rapid transfer like you'd find in the tropical rainforest, but also there's quite an even balance between the stores, which is also not common in the tropical rainforest. Okay, when you've done that completed sketch and labels, then you can unpause the screen and we'll go on to the next task. Okay, so abiotic and biotic factors associated with the temperate deciduous forest biome. These ones you just need to write down as much as you, well, write them down in full. Again, if you've got the note-taking sheet, there'll be a section for them. If you're just taking notes in your book, then just copy each bullet point. Sorry, I'm being a bit lazy. It's not a very inspiring activity, this, just copying out, but I will talk you through each one as well. So deciduous woodlands are typical of temperate climates. The only other temperate climate ecosystem you'd find is temperate grassland. Half the year is a growth period, so spring into summer into sort of late autumn, and then half the year is kind of a cool winter period where growth stops or slows down. Leaves will be shed at the autumn time, at this time, because of unsuitable conditions for photosynthesis. That means there's less light, and also there's potentially water problems. Because water, when it's colder, is potentially frozen in the earth, the trees can't access it, the plants can't access it. So to preserve energy, and because they're getting less sunlight, they shed their leaves. The canopy and the shrub layers are largely of what we call woody perennials, so species that come back every single year, whilst the field and ground layers are herbaceous types. So what that means is kind of very leafy, flower-bearing kind of plants. They tend to die back in the late autumn and sometimes before, when we're talking about bluebells. The field and ground layers show considerable diversity. That means there is a massive range of ground flora and wildlife that you wouldn't necessarily find in a tropical rainforest, because in the deciduous temperate forest biome, there is more light available, particularly when you've got the kind of spring months and no leaves on the trees, or only small leaves. Lots of light can get to the forest floor, and that's when snowdrops and bluebells can start to spring up. And then as the canopy grows, it reduces that light, so a lot of the other species of ferns and brackens will start to grow then, rather than in the early spring. Deciduous woods display a marked change over a period of around 6 months. So again, you can see a dramatic change in deciduous woodlands throughout the year. And it says read the paragraph above. I've just read it to you, but what I'd like you to do is really just try and add any of this information either around your Gersmehl model or just as notes, just sort of straight up notes in your handout. So you're fully aware of the different structural elements of the deciduous woodland biome, because in the rainforest we look at the emergent layer, the canopy, etc. This one tells you really there's a bit more significance on the ground layer and the diversity of that than you would find in a tropical rainforest. So again, I'm always trying to highlight to you the differences between those two biomes to compare them. So the carousel information, which is again found on 365 separately. Okay, if you're in class, you'll be going around to all the different tables, filling in the information. But as the carousel information is saved on 365, you can just go through each of the different sections to complete that A3 sheet. So I've already given you a good start with regards to location and a focus on the structure of the ecosystem. But anything you're missing with regards to climate, the type of soil, okay, which is called brown earth, it's very thick, very nutrient rich. The type of vegetation that's there, the species that are adapted, and any adaptations of species of plants as well as animals, the structure, the woodland layers, and the seasons, and how the woodland is different at different times of year. I'd like you to use that carousel information on 365 to complete a very comprehensive introduction to the temperate deciduous woodlands. Once you've completed that, that should take you a fairly decent amount of time, you know, within the space of about half an hour, 45 minutes to fully complete that sheet in good depth. So make sure you spend the time to do that. Pause the screen, find the detail, find the information to help you with that. But once you've finished that, you can unpause the screen and then we'll finish off the session. Okay, so just to finish off this session, a bit more exam skills practice. Study figure 3. Here we go, here's figure 3. And this is a real challenge actually, because this is a former A-level question. What I'd like you to do is describe and comment on, so make some inferences, make some kind of educated guesses about the characteristics of the vegetation shown in figure 3. So here's figure 3. What vegetation is shown? You've got vegetation here, you've got vegetation here. So describe it and then comment on it. What can you infer? What maybe time of year is this, for example? All I want you to do is just come up with maybe 2 points of basically educated guesses about what you think is happening or what is relevant about this particular picture to deciduous forests. What time of year do you think it is? What type of species of tree do you think it is, etc.? Okay, so hopefully you've got a couple of answers. I'm going to go through all of the content that I've got here. If you can see it, I think the bottom bit's just cut off slightly. You could have said the trees are natural and they are occurring on a steep slope. Yep, that's describing it. I'm not coming up with any reasons. There's large areas between each tree, which is very typical of deciduous forests. The undergrowth is limited, which tends to suggest, obviously, and there's bits of bracken here, which tends to suggest it's maybe autumn or spring, but there's lots of leaf litter on the ground, which you know, again, normally you'd expect that to be well rotted, or if it hasn't rotted, what season have we maybe gone through? So winter would stop these from rotting, and it would hold lots of nutrients in the litter layer. When it gets to the warmer time of spring is when you might start to see these leaves rotting down. But there is something which tells me it's not necessarily still full-on winter. Look at the trees. There are leaves on them. So yes, there are leaves on the floor which haven't decomposed, so it's cold, but there are also what looks like quite small new leaves on the trees. So that really tells us that time of year-wise, this is probably going to be early spring. So these will start to decompose, these leaves will get bigger, but you can see light poking through as well, so the canopy is obviously not its most dense or thick. The trees are birch and beech, but if you said oak or any other deciduous woodland tree, it would be acceptable. The leaves are typically broad and thin. That's just a stat about deciduous forests. And due to the open nature of the canopy, the trees start to branch and leaf close to ground level. So unlike tropical rainforests where you get buttress roots but just a tall stem, these ones actually have got branches even low down, you know, only sort of less than a metre off the ground. And you can see here you've got a branch really at the base, because it's branching out in sort of this classic V shape straight away, which is very unlike tropical rainforest plants. There you go. Look, there was a bit of an A-level challenge for you, but all it is just really showing why you know this is a deciduous forest, but also any other things that give you clues about when, what time of year, what type of species, and that sort of stuff. Okay, so now you've hopefully got a really good understanding, even more so than you had before you started this session, of the deciduous temperate forest biome. Next session, which is the final session in this whole topic, is going to be looking at the threats to the deciduous forest biome, as well as sustainable management of the deciduous forest biome. So thank you for listening this time, and I will see you next time.